I should probably go into a little more detail about um, my time being addicted to lower tabs. I wasn't always addicted, even when I was taking them. But if I look back and I'm honest, I started taking more of them whenever my life started going a direction I wasn't happy with, when I started getting depressed. But my doctor told me that I'd be on pain pills the rest of my life because there's no way to take away that pain because I scar so bad that my scarring is actually going to be causing a lot of the pain. And he's right. I mean, he was right. I've got fibromyalgia, which just basically means I've been in pain so long that now my body recognizes most things as pain. So I'll just randomly hurt somewhere for no reason. But I really started picking up, taking more pills about 2009. I was taking them, but I wouldn't call myself addicted until about that time, about the time that me and Stephanie got serious. I just always seemed so much happier that I wasn't stressed about hurting, that I wasn't thinking about hurting, and that's the trick is you're always thinking about whenever the pain pill runs out, whenever it stops working, and so you're constantly in this state of anxiety. And I couldn't leave the house without having my pills on me. I was always scared to accidentally forget my pills. I would turn around. I'd be an hour drive into somewhere, and I'm like, "Crap! I forgot my pills," and turn around and go back and get them. I just couldn't function without them. And when I was running out, the fear that was inside me was that of, imagine you're in a dungeon and you're looking straight at the torture tools that's going to be used against you, and you know there's a way out, but you can't see it. And so you do anything you can to figure out how to stop that torture, because going through withdrawals is torture. I mean, everything from mental, physical, emotional, health, spiritual, everything hurts. So I was always running into that. And it got to the point where I couldn't get enough pills prescribed to me. And so I would buy them somewhere else. I know that's wrong. I knew it then. But I convinced myself it's because the doctors are so scared of getting in trouble that they won't give me the amount of pills that I need. So when I finally decided to quit taking pills, I realized my second wife, Stephanie, never even knew me when I was sober. I say sober now. I didn't think of it like that then. I didn't think I was addicted. I thought I was. It, I thought most of the pain that was happening whenever I stopped taking them was caused by the pain, not by the drug. And truth be known, you convince yourself that everything is pain. Your mind tells you, "Oh, you're about to start hurting, so you need to take this." And the doctor told me, they don't do it now, as far as I know, but the doctor told me that I needed to take the pain pills before I start hurting. Otherwise, it's going to be useless. And he wasn't wrong, but that's exactly how you get addicted to them. And so when I finally decided to get off pain pills, I've been in a lot of pain in my life. I've known all types of pain, but it literally felt like I was being tortured and I was about to die. And it kept on in my head that people told me that you can't quit cold turkey because it will kill you, because it's getting off of heroin, basically. But I kept telling myself that that's impossible. Nothing can kill me. And I think that's truly why I was able to do it, was because I didn't think things could kill me. I knew things could get me to that brink of death. But being what I've been through, seeing what I've seen, I don't think I'm invincible. I just think I'm really hard to kill. I was talking to a buddy of mine, Nathan, who knew me since high school. Um, it was one of my best friends. Now we're not really as friends much as we are brothers, meaning we don't really talk a lot, but we're still close. But we ran into another friend of ours from high school that we graduated high school with, and she was just real chattery, just chatting bad. Just, I thought she was on meth. And whenever she left, I said, "Man, what is wrong with her?" I said, "She seems like she's on meth, but she doesn't have any of the signs I know of that when people are on meth." And he said, "Dude, she's on pain pills. She's been taking pills for years, and she didn't take them because she hurt. She took them because she wanted to get high." I didn't like being high. I didn't think, but I asked him. I said, "Did I sound like that?" He said, "Yes." But see, I didn't recognize that. I didn't see it like that at all. I thought I was speaking normally, but I wasn't. But it seemed the only way I could be happy was when I was taking my pain pills. And I thought I was happy just because I wasn't hurting. And so I was euphoric. But it was the pills. So when I finally quit, I had to find out who I was. I had to relearn about me. I had to relearn how to talk to people, how to be happy. I mean, I always struggled being happy, but damn, it got a lot harder when you get off pills. So anyway, fast forward, and I know I've skipped and said I did the whole with Trisha thing, and my ex-girlfriend that I moved with that was my age, but I think that was one of the bigger problems is that I mean, we were destined not to last, but um, I couldn't fake it. I couldn't fake happiness anymore. When I was on pills, I could be happy with anybody. It didn't matter. But I wasn't on pills anymore. And so I couldn't be somebody she wanted me to be. And she was definitely not somebody I wanted to be with. I guess she was a good person, but she seemed to lack substance, you know. And that's important to me, substance. So anyway, when I started talking to Sierra, I that's what I saw in her. It was somebody that looked deeply into things, that she was actually smart. Um, but she didn't judge me for anything that I've been through or done. And I didn't tell her a lot or anything like that. But, if I didn't say things the right way, I could just be myself. And she didn't just look at me like I was an idiot or like I was beneath her. And the more we spent time with together, the more it seemed like she wanted to be with me. And that was a feeling I've never had before. Every time somebody was with me, I could tell they were with me for a specific purpose. You know, I mean, my first wife, it was honestly, I think it was because she realized that I could live without her. And I was a good guy. And so she thought that was enough. It's what young people do. They think like that. And my second wife, I mean, she wanted somebody to rescue her, somebody to take care of her. And that's who I was. But nobody ever actually wanted to be with me. Nobody wanted to get to know me. Nobody, it never felt like somebody truly enjoyed my company. Everybody seemed to want to change me when I was with them because I was just never good enough. But man, whenever we were together, it's like we grew up together. We're 11 years apart. I which I thought that was the age didn't bother me as much just because I was used to dating younger girls, but my generation doesn't really get along really well with the younger generation. We have a lot of differences. I don't say don't get along, but to be married is a stretch. But we did stay together, and by that was in, let's see, early October of 2014. By Halloween, I meet her mom, It was flipping nuts, but a little over possessive. She just wanted to control everything, and you could tell. But I was nice to her, and she was nice to me, you know. But by that Christmas, it's like I was part of the family. Everybody accepted me, you know. She knew I had Asperger's. She didn't judge me for it. She knew I was different. She was fine with that. She was fine that I wasn't able to do like a lot of people. I don't get excited, and I feel bad. I've always felt bad about that. That I don't show affection like a lot of people, and that I'm not. I don't ever claim to be good enough for her, but I try, you know. But that Christmas was weird. It just that's when I started really noticing her mom and stepdad were just pure material. They had no substance. I remember us going to their house for Christmas, and instead of wrapping anything, they just literally throw things at us. Say, here, Merry Christmas. And it's like, what? There was no tradition. There was nothing sacred really. But, I spent a lot of time with her son. And in fact, I started looking at him like he was my son. You know, I'd take him out and would go to the park, stuff like that. And he wasn't spending as much time with his grandmother. And from what people have said was that he was a different kid when he was with me. He seemed always unhappy when he was over there. And I was actually nervous that it would be the opposite, that he would end up hating me because I made him mind. I wouldn't let him cry in public over not getting the food that he wants or something like that. It was just, but I learned he had no structure. He was not allowed to fail because he was not allowed to try anything. His grandma did everything for him, which made potty training was a huge priority because he was almost 5 years old and still not potty trained. And so I spent a lot of time with him, and I put it right there that I just made it consistent. And he learned very quickly. Within a week, he was potty trained. So he knew how to do it. It's just that his grandma, you know. But anyway, by come this February, I knew that she was expecting me to ask her to marry me. I could just sense it. The way she would talk about forever, stuff like that. And I did want to marry her. She'll claim that I said, I love you before she did, but she said, I love you first. I very well remember it because I was very strict in my head not to say it. I told myself I would not say it, not until she says it, because I was prone to being the first person to ever say it. And a lot of times I'd say it out of want and not reality. I wanted to love somebody and I wanted them to love me. And I've learned you can't do that. You can't love somebody into loving you. You can't force people to love you. And you can't force yourself to love somebody. I tried a lot. And I said the L word way too many times to the point where I hated saying it now. I have friends that'll say it and I don't say it back. You too. That's what I say. But man, she's the first person I've ever seen in my entire life or known in my entire life that I knew we'd be together forever. She was my forever. I saw it. My first wife, I knew it wasn't going to last. I did it anyway. My second wife, same thing. I even told people at the time. People thought I was dumb, but I was like, it's just the way it's supposed to happen. I don't know why, but I know that I'm supposed to take these steps. But so on midnight, 5 minutes after midnight, so February 15th, I asked her to marry me. got her to the point where she didn't think I was going to, and then I did. Because I don't like cliches and I don't like being predictable. And of course, she said yes. So we got engaged, and I was planning on the engagement to be in like a year long, 2 year long engagement. I was not in a hurry. I said that there's no reason we need to get married right away. But she was not having that. Um, we set the date for July 3rd um, because I was still trying to be with my family, my mom's side of the family. I was still trying to have that relationship, and I knew that we have a family reunion on Fourth of July every year at the lake because my aunt and uncle live at the lake, and right across the road is my other aunt and uncle. Um, so, and it was just right there. So we have this huge party every year. So I was like, that would be perfect. So we actually we didn't spend a lot of money. I mean, hell, our engagement rings and uh, our wedding band total um, was for both of us $35. And I let her pick it out. Compared to my ex-wife, it was like 3 or 4 thousand, and so it told me a lot. You know, but so we planned the wedding. Uh, we end up not being able to have it. We were going to have it behind the house at my aunt and uncle's house, but it flooded that year, and so we ended up having it at a church that I actually used to go to. My first church I got baptized at in '97 or '98. Anyway, so um, I had it there because it wouldn't cost me anything. Um, and we ended up uh, going, and most of my family didn't go. Um, they were right there, and it was literally just a couple of miles from my aunt and uncle's house that they had to travel, and it was only a couple of hours at most. Well, honestly, it was less than that. It was probably because we had the reception at my aunt and uncle's house. It was the wedding itself was probably like 30 minutes, and we show up, and I it's funny because I forgot the music. And so I had one of my best friends. He officiated the wedding. He's a Bixby police officer, and he was expecting music, and of course there was none. But I had another friend there that, I mean, this friend is from high school. We don't really hardly ever talk, but he's been to every one of my weddings. I mean, he's just been there. Even though we don't really talk, we don't really socialize anything, but he's one of them friends. And I always appreciated that about him. But anyway, so he's actually from Church of Christ, and so I went up to him and I told him, I was like, "Well, I knew you were coming to the wedding, and so I know y'all don't allow music in churches, and so we figured we'd do it like this." It was a joke, but because I felt retarded, I felt stupid because I that was my only job, was to bring the music, and I completely forgot it. But my sister, who is a Jehovah's Witness, she was actually supposed to go to the wedding. And when I invited her to the wedding, I didn't want to invite her. Um, my aunt convinced me to invite her, so I invited her, and she said she would love to go. Then she asked me if I had somebody to take pictures, and I said no, not yet. Um, and so she said, "Well, can my friend come who takes wedding photography? She won't charge me you anything." I'm like, "Yeah, that'd be great." So I didn't make any plans for anybody to take pictures because she would go. Well, she didn't even show up. And I didn't hear from her for like 2 weeks. And she told me, well, she didn't feel comfortable going, even though it's not against their religion. she just didn't feel right going into another church other than a Jehovah's Witness church. So me and my wife don't have pictures of our wedding. We have a couple that a friend of mine, a friend of ours, took from her cell phone. But other than that, there's no record, like picture record of our wedding. And then, of course, most of my family didn't show up. I found out that one of my uncles actually said, well, it's his third wife. It's not that important anymore, which hit hard, you know. Um, especially because, I mean, his son got married for a third or fourth time, and, he shows it for that. But that was the loyalty my family shows me. They just wasn't that big a deal. Um, Funny thing about being married though is that I found out that like a couple of months before this, I found out that I wasn't technically divorced. My ex-wife was supposed to file the paperwork and everything. I'd already signed it and everything, and it was never done. So I had to rush and get it filed and everything, and get the divorce finalized before we could before I could legally get married. And we're technically married out of Arkansas because, well, Oklahoma has a 6-month law, but Arkansas doesn't. So getting married wasn't without its issues, but it didn't matter. I mean, we went on our honeymoon. We actually went to California, met a couple of people, pharmacists that are now retired pharmacists, but we ended up being lifelong friends with them. I guess I should probably back up and tell you about my job situation between this time. So I'm going a little back and forth like I always do. So whenever we got serious, before we got married, and I moved in with her, of course I needed to get a job. Well, I decided to, well, let me back up. Before I moved in with her, I got a job at LaFleur County Sheriff's Department in the jail. What I'd learned is not to just jump into a sheriff's department without learning about the department. And you learn a lot working in a jail. So I started working there, and I just travel back and forth. I actually stayed in my family's cabin on the days I worked, and when I was off work, I would go and stay with Sierra. Well, pretty soon I ended up moving in with Sierra because it was just kind of a pain in the butt, and I'd just drive to the jail. And so when I was there, what I learned very quickly was that things weren't on the up and up. People weren't. It was different, and I'd always said, in law enforcement, everything changes south of 40. 40 is the I-40. Rules tend to get a little skewed. It's more good old boy, which is seemed to be pretty true for a lot of departments. Well, this was no exception. Um, One of the first things I saw was that there was a couple of girls that got brought in. Like I said, I was in the jail. Um, they got brought in, and when I was talking with them, they had stated that um, they got unlawfully arrested. And so I was kind of curious. Again, I was scoping out the sheriff's department. I wanted to know if it was something that was worth me working at, because I loved my career, but I hated jumping into departments that were crap. So they tell me that they get pulled over, and the officer that pulled them over asked them if he could have permission to search the car. Well, they said no. And so he told them that they had to wait, and waited till a dog got there, and drug dog hit on the car and found marijuana, and hence arrested him. Now, if you don't know anything about the law, you'd say, well, what's wrong with that? The drug dog, got him. However, according to the law, you cannot ask to search a vehicle under duress. If you are not free to go, it's implied that you're under duress, that you feel obligated to say yes. And so you have to be free to go. Well, as soon as he did not let them go, that meant that they were never free to go in the first place. And they actually had to wait 15 minutes for the drug dog. Well, I actually ended up talking to the narc officer that about this, and he said that's not the way it is. I said that's exactly the way the law is, and I learned there that it didn't matter, and they got convicted. Um, and so that was the first thing that kind of, you know, make me scratch my head. Well, I didn't work there for very long. Not too much longer. There's another a supervisor that worked there the same day, the same shift that I did, and he also was a reserve deputy and a police officer in a neighboring town, in a smaller town. Well, and a supervisor in the jail. So he had a lot of jobs. Anyways, there's this kid that gets brought in that was mouthy. They had been there before. They all knew him. Everybody knew him. He was a real mouth. He cussed a lot. He talked a lot of trash. And so they decide to strap him down in the chair. The chair is this heavy chair that has wheels on the back, so when you lift it like this, you can push somebody. But if you don't have it bent backwards, you can't push anybody. And it straps your arms down, straps your legs down. You can't move at all. So he puts him. The supervisor puts him in a cell by himself, and it begins to yell at him. And it's me, the supervisor, another officer is in there, and the kid just keeps on yelling and stuff. The supervisor reaches back and just slaps him as hard as he could, and actually tips the chair where it almost falls on the side. And it's all on camera. And so I'm like, yeah, that's a violation of a person's Fourth Amendment rights. It actually violates several different rights. But uh, so it might not be Fourth Amendment. It might be something else. Anyway, um, so later, of course, I have an issue with this. I can't not do something. So I go to the jail administrator, who also happens to be the undersheriff, and I tell him about it. And I tell him that it's a problem. And he watches on video. And he says, "Okay." He said, "Well, I'll take care of this." He puts me on a different shift and does nothing to the guy, the supervisor, at all. He doesn't get written up, doesn't get fired, suspended, nothing. Nothing happens. But I get moved to a different shift. So I decided this is not the place for me. So I end up going to looking at Polk County, where my wife lived, or girlfriend at the time, sorry, Sierra lived. And I went to the sheriff's department and turned in my resume, and I talked to the undersheriff there, and he told me very specifically that he could probably get me in the jail because they do need somebody. But I do have a pretty impressive resume, but he would never hire me because I am not from there. That's a sign. That's a clue. Because why would that even matter? If the law is the law, but it did matter there, and I found out pretty quickly. So I went to work in the jail, and I learned quite a bit about the sheriff's department and the people around there, and I decided I do not want to work as a deputy there. Um, The jail administrator and the assistant administrator were good people, though. I got along with them great, and I learned a lot of things from the inmates there. A lot of things about people, and I worked as a dispatcher and a jailer. Uh, but while I was there, I actually get offered, or I a police the police chief in a neighboring town that was still in the county said he was looking for a sergeant position, and he knew that I had a lot of experience. And the problem is that they can't hardly get anybody that has experience to work there because they pay so little. Well, our bills weren't really that much at all, and so I could afford to go to work somewhere that wasn't paying a whole lot. So I went and I applied, and it was strange because I found out that the mayor worked at Tyson Foods, and the chief used to work at Tyson Foods, and he'd only been a chief for about a year. And before that, he worked at Tyson Foods, and he had never been in law enforcement at all. So he'd only been an officer for a year, and he's the chief of police. I found out that all the other officers were the same boat. The only two officers that didn't work at um, Tyson Foods were two young kids. I mean, they're 21, 22 years old. Um, and the rest, all the other reserve officers were employed by Tyson Foods, and all the city council was employed by Tyson Foods. So it was a little strange to me, but I go through the interview process, and um, I actually negotiated a take home vehicle, which had never happened before. But it was a 45-minute drive to work, so I I decide to or I get the job. They go ahead and give me the job. It was strange because part of the job as a sergeant or as an officer there was to go by Tyson Foods and check their temperature on their cooler. Which, as an officer, I thought that was a little weird, but I was like, all right. And I checked their properties. But as the sergeant, also, my job was as second in command of the next to the chief of police. So it was the chief, then it was me. And my job was to also go through the SOP manuals, the standard operating procedure manual, which is basically like police officers' rule book, their laws that they had to follow, um, uh, along with the city and state laws and the federal laws. Well, when I was looking through this manual, I noticed that when it started talking about the duties of a police officer in that town, it put in it had in chronological order the three main duties. First duty is to Tyson Foods. Second duty is to Granis, which was the town that I was in. And third duty was Wicks, which was the town next over. And it's because they didn't have a police department. Uh, they actually pay for Granis to also cover Wicks also. Well, I took this to my chief and I said, we can't do this. And he's like, why not? I said, because it's a violation of, you know, people's rights. And he's like, how? I was like, because we don't work for a business. We can't. It's a conflict of interest. Um, and it's dangerous. I said, what if there's a domestic call in the city and I'm headed towards it and Tyson calls me and says, hey, there's a guy with a flat tire here. By law, I'm to go to that flat tire. Somebody could be getting hurt. And if I don't, I could lose my job. Or worse, I could end up getting jail time for derelict of duty. And he said, oh, that would never happen. I was like, well, yeah. But he said later on in our conversation, he's like, man, you ask a lot of questions. He said, why can't you just do what everybody else does? It's like, 'cause I'm not like everybody. And somewhere in the conversation, I mentioned that I had Asperger's. And I said, but it's, well, after that, he started acting funny around me. And he comes up to me all along the side of the road. He said he had to talk to me. And I said, okay. He calls me up to the police department. He says, somebody made a complaint about you, said that you were aggressive, which was completely not my personality. And so I asked him, I said, to who? Name the call. We didn't really get calls. I mean, it was most of the people in that town worked for Tyson Foods, and a good percentage of them were illegal immigrants. They didn't call the police. So I asked him, and they couldn't come up with who said it. So they dropped that. They were going to try to write me up, but I said, well, write me up, but you got to tell me who did it. You can't just say somebody did it. And then he calls me a few days later and says, on the side of the road, he says, you need to start thinking about your kid and your family and just do what you're supposed to be doing. And I looked at him, I'm like, well, I am thinking about my family. I'm like, how can I tell my son, my stepson, to always do the right thing and always be honest if I'm not going to do it? I told him, I was like, I don't know how y'all do it here, but I took an oath to the Constitution, to the people. I did not take an oath to the police department and to my superiors. I'm not going to do what's wrong because I'm ordered to. And he let it go. And then I thought a week later, I get called in and told that they saw a picture of me on Instagram where I just had a mustache because they wouldn't let me have my facial hair or beard or anything. And so I was just being funny and just shaved a mustache because I could have a mustache. And somebody commented on there, Sergeant Pornstache. They wrote me up for it and then fired me for it, even though I had nothing to do with it. But I knew why they fired me. It was because I was asking too many questions. Because I also was trying to get them up to date on computers because they didn't have anything in a computer system. Everything was on paper. Well, if you know things about corruption, corruption is easier done if you don't have a trail. And if you don't have it on a computer system, then it's easy to throw a piece of paper away. So if somebody wrote something they didn't want there, they just threw it away. And that's how things were done there. And I was trying to not make it like that anymore. I was trying to protect the citizens. So I ended up losing my job. In between this time, I my stepson's dad decides to come back in the picture, and he decides to file suit against my wife because he owed like $3,500 in child support at that time, and I don't know why, but he thought he could make her pay for it. Um, and so we decided that since he's going to be doing that anyway, I'm going to get a job in a different state. And I said, we need to go back home to Oklahoma. I said, there's a lot more opportunities there, and there's just too much drama around here, and I'm not good with drama. And so I applied for a job up there, but we also had to go to court to fight for him to be able to go, Tristan, my wife's son, to be able to move with us. And so we go to court. Well, in that time, we tell her mom that we're moving, and her first response is, well, I was going to buy you a house, which is not the response we expected. But we were like, my wife told her, so, buy us a house in Oklahoma if you wanted to buy us a house. But she didn't want to buy us a house. She didn't want us leaving. And from that moment on, she no longer liked me because I was moving her out. And I'd already told her because my wife used to call her when she was upset. And then when she got off the phone, she was even more upset. And I asked her one day, I'm like, why do you call her when you're upset? If you're just going to be upset even more. And she said, well, because it's my mother. I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't make sense if you're calling for, you know, somebody to console you and it gets worse. What is the purpose? And so she just quit calling her over that stuff. And Tristan was didn't have to go over to their house all the time because I was like, I'll watch him. It's not good for him to not have a stable environment. Well, so I was not very liked anymore. And so she decides to call DHS, Child Protective Services, and say that I was carrying a gun all the time and I also took testosterone. That's how I knew it was her, because the only person that knew that I took testosterone, because I'm not from that area, was her mother. And I took it legally. The doctors actually prescribed me testosterone, which doesn't do anything. So when the CPS came over, they kind of laughed because there's like, well, she says that you carry a gun all the time. I'm like, I'm a sergeant at the police department. I've got to carry a gun. She laughed because her husband is a deputy. So she knows you carry a gun with you all the time, and so it was dropped, but it was, but she ended up calling again. But this time my wife goes up to her mother and says, if you call, because we've already talked to DHS, they said, if you call one more time, you're going to get in trouble. You're going to get a felony for filing false report to DHS. Miraculously, nobody ever called again. But that's not when it stopped. Whenever we were in court, um, we found out that her mother had actually gone over to the other attorney and her ex-husband and started working with them to try to get us to lose custody of, my stepson and her. Not only where we couldn't move, but where they would, you know, she would lose custody. And then her mother said, um, if you leave Josh, I'll, um, I'll drop everything. So it's pretty clear what her purpose was. But my wife didn't, you know. But we still kept fighting. In fact, I got a job within 2 weeks. I got a job in Tulsa, as a low voltage electrician. Actually, I got out of law enforcement because I said I need to get in a job that I can take care of a family. My first wife did not want me to be in law enforcement once I was in. My second wife definitely did not want me, and she asked me to quit. But my wife now never once asked me to leave law enforcement. But I wanted to be able to take care of my family. My passion was law enforcement, but it was no longer as strong as my passion for my family and my sacrifice. I didn't look at it as a sacrifice, because I wanted to take better care of my family. Um, and so we go to court, and his attorney first starts throwing up pictures from my Facebook, and I guess he wanted to get embarrass me or something. But if I posted it on Facebook, it's not embarrassing. You know, there was this. Me and a few friends were making fun of people taking selfies of everything, and so there was a picture of me um, on the toilet, on the potty, in the restroom, whatever you want to call it. And I had a snapshot of me. It was just my face, and I said hashtag pooping pics. And he throws that out there and hands it to me, and he says, "What do you think of this?" I said, "It's funny." And then he stopped. He didn't know what to say. I mean, and the people in the courtroom started chuckling and laughing because he was trying to embarrass me or something. I don't know. But then he asked me, he's like, "How did you get a job so quick? Who did you know up there?" Because the thing about it is that one of the complaints about his client, my stepson's dad, was that he hadn't worked in years, and his excuse was he couldn't find work, and yet I move up there and I'm always finding work. And I found work. And I said, I don't know anybody up there. He said, well, how'd you get the job? I said, I applied. It's just that easy. If you want to find work, you go find work. Sometimes it's not where you're at. Sometimes you have to work where you don't want to work. Like I worked in the jail at Polk County. I didn't want to work there. And I stayed there for 2 years. I didn't really want to work at Granis Police Department, but I did, because I wanted to be close to my wife and my stepson. And I didn't want to be a low voltage electrician, but I took the job because I needed to take care of my family. And in the meantime, I'm driving, a 3 hour one way um, to go to work, 6 hour round trip. And so what I'd do is during the week, I would stay up there with a friend and I'd come home on the weekends. And that's how I did it for several months, for about 5 months, actually, while we're going through court. And then he brings up the fact that I was not divorced officially until about a month and a half before my wedding. And he says, well, in Oklahoma, you can't get married for 6 months. He said, what would you do if your marriage is void? Because if we're not really married, then how can I, get custody of Tristan? And I said, we would go downstairs and I would get married. And he didn't know what to say about that. And then finally, the judge, not my attorney, the judge looks at him and says, you cannot hold anybody accountable for another state's laws. That's how they did things there. And my attorney, who we'd been paying, didn't do anything, And that brings me to the next thing is while I'm going through this, I'm trying to actually bring a lawsuit against Tyson Foods and the city of Granis and the police department for violating people's constitutional rights and for legally terminating me. No, I didn't want to work there anymore. And I even told him that. And my attorney said that I shouldn't have said that, but it was the truth. I did not want to work for them anymore because they're corrupt. But I it took me 5 months to be able to find an attorney that would even take the case. Nobody wanted to touch it because it's Tyson Foods. To backtrack a little bit, Tyson Foods has a long history of owning cities, and they owned the police department there. They gave $20,000 a year for tires, stuff like that. They were always giving money to the police department in the city, and everybody worked there. A little side story in 1979, 1980, something around there, Hillary Clinton actually invested $1,000 into Tyson Foods, and a year later it turned into $100,000. Fast forward into the 90s, and a lawsuit against Tyson Foods because Tyson Foods was dumping chicken feces into the Illinois River, and two vice presidents of Tyson Foods ends up getting jail time, I think 10 years each, and Bill Clinton pardons them. There's a lot of corruption that goes in this area. And we were only a few miles away from Bill Clinton's home, where he was born. In Mena, if you've ever seen, I forgot what the movie is, it was with Tom Cruise, but it was about them doing drug runs out of Mena, Arkansas. This is where we lived. So it is known for corruption in that area. I did not know this before I moved there. Or before I started law enforcement there. I found out later. So basically, it was really difficult to find somebody that was willing to fight against Tyson Foods, and I didn't understand why. Because I believe you do what's right, not because of the consequences, but because it's right. Well, later on in the lawsuit, my attorney contacts me and tells me that they finally got they chose the federal judge that's going to be overlooking my case. And then I found out that he'd worked for Tyson Foods 10 years before he was this federal judge like 10 years ago, he'd worked for Tyson Foods. And he, not 10 years before he's federal judge, 10 years from this date, he'd worked for Tyson Foods. And I asked my attorney if I said, should he recuse himself? Because it's a conflict of interest. He said, oh, no, it's been long enough. 10 years? It's been long enough? Anytime's not long enough. But it told me this is what I'm dealing with. This is what we're dealing with. You know, people don't understand what corruption is. It's not just people taking money off the streets and stuff, for, you know, that kind of stuff, or getting away with going to jail. It's literal towns being owned by businesses, and being protected by the government to own these towns. You know, and they're still doing it to this day. I ended up taking a plea deal because he said that I could, because I can't prove that they were judgmental on me because of having Asperger's, that it didn't matter. So that's null and void. He said I would have to get the person who diagnosed me as Asperger's on the stand and all this other stuff, and you know, it's just. And then he said, what's going to end up happening is they're going to throw the case out if I don't take this plea deal. Or it's not called a plea deal because I'm not the defendant. But if I don't take this offer and everything, and the only thing is that I can never sue him for this again. Like, okay, fine. I just wanted done with it because dealing with 2 court cases at the same time, and battling it by myself because nobody was on my side, you know. In fact, my wife's stepdad, before they decided they didn't like me, had told me that when in court, it's not about, it's okay to lie in court. Just don't be the first person to lie. Well, it made sense whenever I started doing some searching on him. I did some research, and he had always claimed that he was a Harvard graduate that was also a Supreme Court justice. He worked for the NSA and the CIA, and he was also a police commissioner for LA, LA County. And of course, this was pretty far-fetched. I did, however, see a picture of him with Castro, which told me his belief systems. But when we go to court, he actually takes the stand against me. And he starts laughing with the court reporter and joking, and she's looking at him like, what the hell are you doing? I mean, he kept on talking. He kept on. It was so bad that the judge actually called the attorneys and said that if you call another person on the stand like him, I'm going to throw this whole case out and just hand it over to them. And so they didn't, you know, they took him off the stand and everything, but he was a joke. And come to find out, when I did the research, he never graduated at Harvard. He never practiced law. He did graduate from law school. I did find that out. But it was not there. It was some other school in California. I can't remember. And of course, he was never a Supreme Court justice. He was never worked for the NSA, CIA. However, when he was in the Navy, he did work on things that worked next to the CIA and NSA, but he didn't work with them. He wasn't part of them. And they do that a lot. I've worked as a police officer. I've worked next to FBI. That didn't mean I was part of the FBI, you know. So everything he said was a lie. Come to find out, he was a trust fund baby, and he had never worked in his life. He'd always just had a trust fund coming in. He was adopted into this Jewish family, and he was given everything. And when he moved to Arkansas, he acted like he just created this persona that wasn't real. And that's the way they treated Sierra. They controlled everything. They paid for her house, paid for all of her utilities. And when I moved in, and we got married, I said, I told them that you're not going to pay for anything anymore. That's my job. And he actually said it on the stand as if it was a bad thing. That I told them that I wasn't going to let them pay for anything anymore. And at the end of it, the judge finally gave us the right to move, but he would not give custody over. And he said he would accept under Arkansas law if the father spends 5 minutes in a year's time with the child, you cannot take their rights away. Um, which I mean, at that time we were not happy about it. Me and him did not get along. We were not friends of each other. And so when we moved to Oklahoma, we I'm at this job that I absolutely hated, but I was working. Um, and we moved in with a friend of mine who offered, because he was never home. He offered to let us move up there because we didn't have any money to move. Her mother actually ended up taking all of our stuff and putting it in a storage shed, and not giving us access to it. Um, while we were gone, when we were moving some of our stuff, because we had to go back in loads. We got one load, and then she took everything. Um, but while we were up there, I thought this friend of mine was being nice, and he knew that the reason why was because we were trying to save money up to be able to get our own place. We weren't planning on staying there. And he said, "Hey, you don't have to pay for anything. Just, if you can pay something, but try to save your money to move and everything. Pay for what we use." And I was okay with that. I was like, yeah, that'd be great. And I was really appreciative. But my, my my stepson had to sleep on the floor with his dogs in crates. He kept them in crates at night. And then he kept on charging us for everything. And I didn't think he was going to charge us for anything. And I couldn't save up any money to move. We were trying to move out. Well, his dog actually attacked my dog and nearly killed him. And he did this right in front of my son. And it was a really dangerous situation. And when I called, he was like, he didn't even ask about my son. He didn't offer to pay for anything. He's like, all right, well, keep me posted and stuff. He didn't care. In fact, so we decided that we needed to leave. And so we found a place in um, in Sand Springs. It was close to Tulsa because I was working in Tulsa, a full time job, and Sierra was working in Tulsa. Um, and But we were struggling. We were struggling bad. Um, but something told me one night. I don't know what it was. My wife was going to church then. I wasn't, because I'd been burned by church, and I just did not want to go to church. But I woke up one morning and I had this strong sense to quit fighting Tristan's dad. And he was being a complete ass. He was dating this girl that they were just unscrupulous. I mean, it was just we just couldn't trust them. I mean, every time we talked to them, it was about them trying to get something over on us. But something told me to quit fighting. And I told my wife, and she said, I literally was going to talk to you about that, because she said I got that. And from that moment, everything went smooth. I quit trying to find out ways that we didn't have to let Tristan stay over there. It was just whatever makes you happy. I mean, if you want to visit, you can visit. And so we started having a good relationship with him. Um, to the point I'm actually friends with him. I consider him a good friend of mine. And I'm not saying anything we didn't talk about already. I didn't like him when I first met him. He didn't like me. I mean, we were butting heads. You know, I thought he was a piece of shit because he was a deadbeat, and he thought I was a piece of shit because I was taking his son. You know, um, And the truth of the matter is, he stepped up. He really did. I'm super impressed because he started actually making decisions, you know, for the benefit of his son. He started caring about him. He quit dating that one girl and he ended up getting with another one, and they ended up getting married. And, it's just been great. He's still in the military. He got a job. And he was making good money. Now he works full time for the military. But all of it because I let go, because I listened to that intuition, which I fully 100% believe it's the God within us. It's God talking to us. But I still wasn't going to church at that time. Uh, but I decided, I'm not happy working at this job, this electrician job. And so the low voltage electrician, not to be confused with high voltage or with other types of electrician. This type of stuff is just simple. So I started getting into car sales. And I think that's a pretty good place to stop, because most of this is not as exciting as all the other stuff. And, I've been talking for over an hour. But anyway, if you have any questions, like I said, just message me, let me know. Let me know what I need to go into depth about. But I appreciate it.